Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 25th, 2010. And, sorry about that. We accidentally started the last, the autopilot turned on for, Day 9 Daily. But hey, this is Day 9 Day number 55. We're going to be doing a little bit of, Firebathero versus, Best on a map that I actually think is horribly imbalanced. I don't actually know how on earth, anything, like, anyone let this by. It's, like, appalling to me. But, anyways, I thought it was a really cool game. And, there's two reasons I think that it's awesome. One is that Firebathero is actually winning, which is pretty sweet. I mean, I know I'm spoiling the results, but I'm not a, spoiler show. We do post-game analysis, but Firebathero it started to win, which is kind of cool. He actually won more than one game that night. Ooh, as we'll see in this video. But also, he talked about abandoning his game plan early and completely changing everything and playing everything by feel. So it's a really cool example of the sort of decisions we get to see a really high-level player make, knowing that he didn't actually practice for this game very much, knowing that he just kind of threw something out on the fly. So we can go ahead and talk a little bit about that. First of all, I have to thank the illustrious Patrick T. I mean, I don't want to say his full name here, but Patrick T, who has been who's made some tribute songs for me, which I've been playing on the stream. We'll just rock out just briefly to it. Oh, yeah, here we go. Said, don't go till 3 o'clock. They're scared it's there. Gonna lose my job. Fucking awesome. Alright, sweet. If any of you do anything equally kick-ass, just definitely send it to me, because I love that sort of stuff. But let's go right into the game. Let's just dive right in, check it out. But we have the game loaded up here. We're going to be doing Firebathero against Best. As we can see, this is actually a really high quality video, and I'll make it even higher quality at 480p. And let me just make sure this is working right. Yeah, fantastic. All right, it's working properly. But we got to look at this map, Roadrunner. I took just a glance at this map, and I just don't know how it's fair. Yeah, I mean, Stork was even commenting about this in his interview, that he doesn't even know why they even test these maps, because this map was made, it was tested, and all the pro gamers protested, and they just said whatever and threw it in anyways. I mean, in particular, we have this double bridge here. Again, let's just pretend we're at this right expansion. That's where I normally pretend we are. We have a double bridge right here, so we can get contained pretty easily. We can also manage early rushes pretty easily. We do have this swing around side little expo thingaroo, and I'm picturing myself as Protoss right now, because I actually think this map is impossible for Protoss. If I'm Protoss and I expand here, I have to worry about a Terran spawning at this position and just pushing right up like this. That's going to be a little bit difficult to deal with. I mean, and look at these paths in the middle. It is really hard to get any sort of good surround or flank going on as Protoss. There's all these nice little narrow areas for Terran to just siege up. So I just think this map's gross for Protoss. I just think it's really good for Zerg. I look at this and there's a lot of stuff I like about this as a Zerg player. I mean, first of all, the mains have a nice little thin ramp. So that means I can expand to another main against Terran. Against Protoss, the naturals are pretty well secured. So if I'm here and I expand to this natural as a third, I can take the main really easily. And this 5th expansion ends up being really easy to get to, because notice that my bases are connected with this little sneak around path, right? This little backdoor entrance. So I can't really get cut in half nearly as easily as on other maps. And I mean, if Protoss wants to push either this natural or this natural, he has to come across a double bridge. Oh, Jesus, that's just brutal. So yeah, I feel really bad for Protosses on this map. My sincerest apologies if you are a Protoss user, or if you're Stork, because I just always want Stork to win because he's totally awesome. So what we're going to see in this map is that in the interview, Firebathero, he spawns here, and Best is here. And in the interview, Firebathero said he wanted to go 14 Command Center, because you'll note that the scout paths are pretty funky, the way that you end up moving around. It's kind of a lot of curves and a lot of bends that make it just a little bit longer than it normally would. So, I like the idea of, an early expand, but we're going to see. Firebathero gets scouted super early and ends up abandoning that plan and just goes straight for a 2-factory push. Now, I like 2-factory pushes on this map because we can abuse all these little bits of terrain here, in particular this high ground region. For Protoss, 2-based Arbiter, almost can't be bad. That's how we're going to see Best open. Um, I just don't mind it really on any map where you have gassier expansion. God, look at how like far forward his head's tilted. It looks like he's about to be possessed, but is pushing it off just so he can continue to play StarCraft a little bit longer. Look at him just peering through his eyelashes, man. Super hardcore. This was game 2 of Samsung Con versus SK Telecom. I won't spoil the result of the whole series, but I will say that Firebathero does win this game, so I was quite impressed with that. And everything begins mining naturally, normally. So, normally when you look at a new map, what you should do is you could just do the normal thing. Think of a build that you did on another map and just try to see if you can make it work on this one. That's normally a good starting point if you want to begin playing right away. A few subtle elements I would mention is that you can have small amounts of units controlling key positions in the center, because there is just like not a center. I mean, technically it's this little thing, but I mean it's there's so many little run around paths that you can do. Yeah, I mean every time I look at this map I just think how much it sucks to be Protoss. But anyways, 2-base Arbiter can't be bad. There are some nice expansions. I mean, I do like this high ground area. I mean, this is kind of nice. It's a little bit wide to, like, wall off with a bunch of pylons or something like that. I think another main might be best. But, I mean, really, that's why I think I like 2-base Arbiter on this map, because you only need your main and your natural to get the economy going to do the stuff that you want. And once you have the Arbiters, you have a lot more freedom to just move around the middle of the map, do recalls, just put threats on them. Because think about it, if I'm here as Terran and my opponent's here as Protoss and I'm doing some sort of push, and then he comes down here and recalls into my main, I have to do a really weird drawback to get all the way to my main again, especially crossing those two thin double bridges. A lot of units get stuck and glitch on that pretty hard. So here we see nothing being made yet. We do see the 14 Command Center being planned. And, 14 Command Center is great. It's a really nice build. You have to be very careful with it, and that's what I found so interesting about this game, is I'm the sort of person, God, get that guy out of here. What a goofy little mascot. But I'm the sort of person who, if I have a plan, like if I have just practiced 14 Command Center, I will just stick to it and figure out a way to stick to it. Unless I start finding a ton of losses in practice, then I will prepare a response in practice. But if I'm in a tournament and I've only practiced 14 Command Center, that means that I will certainly be doing that. I think it's a big mistake to abandon your plan unless you have a good follow-through. So that's what I think is really interesting about what Firebathero is doing here, is this is a super late barracks, a super late refinery. He has tons of SCVs. And in a lot of circumstances, this can kind of throw your opponent off. Best, you kind of tend to assume, if you're best, that your opponent isn't awful. You kind of assume when you look at his base that he was planning to do this. So when you see a really late barracks and a really late gas, you get suspicious of stuff. You don't say to yourself, oh yeah, he just, was going 14 Command Center and screwed up. So, one thing that is nice about doing a 2-factory opening, as Firebathero here, even though it's coming out a little bit late, you have enough money to do it. Normally, you have just enough gas to get it, but sometimes you end up hurting a little bit for money if you try to get 2 factories too quickly. Especially if you're trying to make enough Marines for defense at the front and this sort of thing. Oh, Firebathero ready to kill. In a pleasant pastel blue and fluorescent orange. A nice aggressive little outfit there. And this sort of stuff that we're seeing right here, this is essential for any Terran player. This is so important. So, I mean, not taking hits, that's not the important part. But that, look at this. I mean, that is just such a little thing that you can do, just, placing your barracks right here. But look at this. Nice movement here with the Marines that, cuts the Zealot off. And also this little formation here, the barracks and the factory there, that causes a nice little tight hole there. So, I mean, these are all just little things. I mean, notice how this barracks is going to get lifted, and these factories can lift and rearrange if they really need to. But for the most part, I mean, nothing is permanent in terms of this building placement. It's just ways to deal with any sort of early game aggression. So that's absolutely fantastic. Look at this. No SCVs have yet been brought off mining minerals. We just have, like, one guy who's wandering around a little bit. We're not trying to get, like, 3, 4, 5 guys to come off. So as best, you're starting to have a much clearer picture of what your opponent's doing. Again, I think as best you generally assume that your opponent was intending to do this instead of just screwing something up on accident, but still very nice response by Firebathero. And this is another little thing that I think is absolutely essential. Anytime you not just anytime you're in a tight spot, but anytime there's potential for you to get in a tight spot, you should make sure you have a scouting SCV ready. So, for instance, if there is potential for players to do a ton of pressure on your main early on, then make sure you have an SCV in position ready to scout. And look at that, finding out exactly what's up. That's pretty significant, seeing that robotics facility that early. And you're also seeing the range upgrade. A lot of times players will skip the range upgrade if they're doing some sort of cute aggression early on with the robotics facility, like they're going for fast Dark Templar drop or for fast Reavers. A lot of times you'll see them hold off on the range just a little bit so they have a sufficient amount of gas. All those little things we'd like to think about. We're going to see a totally kick-ass push come here by Firebathero, and he is going to be mondo aggressive this game. Like, he's going to be like cutting a ton of SCVs even. And look, he has the extra added money because, these are very late factories, so they haven't quite been producing stuff yet. So I think the lesson to learn here is not to do this build, not to see Firebathero doing this and be like, oh, I can go 2-factory ultra late and then get a command center late. I mean, do it optimally. More so think of the idea of this response and how it's able to be so effective. We are seeing the observatory go down, so, very, very standard play by best, extremely safe. Very effective way to deal with exactly what's being thrown at him. A 2-factory push. He needs to have the observers up for the mines. He needs to make sure he has enough dragoons so that way he can hold everything off. Probably going to be expanding here in a little bit, and there's the probe getting ready to expand. Everything is as normal as can be. But we're still going to see the strength of 2-factory pushes. 2-factory pushes are awesome. I mean, especially when you have this unbelievably awful terrain here. I mean, oh, Jesus. I mean, having this. And, like, look, where are Dragoons going to be positioned here to delay stuff? I mean, it's just like a straight push for Terran. Terran can't get surrounded. Oh, how lovely. And, of course, I'm sure I'll drastically change my opinion of this map once Protoss players find some brilliant solution to it. But still, I'm pretty convinced that it's going to be tough for Protoss. And here comes the push. This is the correct look to any sort of early game push. You move out right when you start to get vultures, but no sooner and no later. You don't wait till you have a big vulture build up. You move out with, your tanks and your marines to really get the push going. And then what happens is the tanks and the marines allow you to get, like, here, allow you to get halfway. And then you have to struggle a little bit to get from here to here, and that's where the vultures are going to come into play. And so look at how obnoxious this is. Best has to have stuff positioned here, and he has to have stuff positioned at the backside. And we do, in fact, see that, Firebathero has to swing stuff around to the back. And yeah, look at this beautiful little push that's going on right here. Now, let's actually stop and just think more about this imbalance. Let us imagine for a moment that this does not even exist, that this is just pure rubble. Literally, that Terran can only exit across this double bridge, and Protoss can only be entered from this double bridge. Now I'm describing something that's a lot like Destination. So you see, the Protoss can actually park a lot of his units here to hold stuff off, to hold this push off. And then, when Terran finally gets across here, Terran is going to have a pretty easy time getting to here. But then it's going to be hard for Terran to get from this side of the double bridge to this side into the Protoss's base. So in other words, Protoss has this key position right here to do a little bit of damage, and then defensively, this key position to do a little bit of damage. But because this stupid fucking thing exists here, I mean, Protoss has to just have all his units sitting here, so Terran gets a free walk. I mean, that's... it's just like so... I mean, look at how strong this push is. Don't let that happen. I mean, obviously. Let's actually back up and focus on the battle a little bit. But the fact that this gentleman right here in his pastel, manly cerulean blue and this fluorescent orange, yeah, it looks like he sprinted through a highlighter factory. But anyways, look at how effective this push is. We know all our opponent's Dragoons kind of have to be pulled back and have to be spread out fairly unevenly. It allows us to just sneak across. We're getting the Marines in there first. We have the tanks doing a lot of damage. And these Vultures, again, are what allow us to advance forward, pretty much producing only Vultures out of our 2 factories. And the expansions landed here as well. And whoopsie daisies. Yeah, I want to watch that just one more time, talk a little bit about this control. Let's actually freeze frame this a couple of times. So we have the Zealot running in early on. Be a little careful with those Zealots because it's really good after mines are planted. And I mean, it's good to absorb damage, but occasionally just pulling it back just a little bit. So we have these guys here. And, you know, targeting the tank is great. You know, I like that idea. But be a little bit careful with your Dragoons here, because notice how a mine got planted, which causes this Dragoon to bump on over. That's always a big danger whenever your Dragoons are too close together that this will happen. And look at this. These Dragoons just didn't have a chance to back up, which actually I think is one of the large reasons why Firebathero's push manages to do so well. Oops, sorry, let me move my bright yellow little thing. And look at how aggressive Firebathero is being. I mean, he's really pushing fiercely forward there. Being real up in his face. And he's not even going to let up, really. I mean, now, if we imagine those 3 Dragoons didn't die, then you can just sort of, you know, skedaddle back home, no big deal, cook some tea, and you're fine. Since he was able to kill off those 3 Dragoons, you can continue to push forward a little bit more. What we're seeing Firebathero do right now, this retreat, you're pretty much always guaranteed to be able to do. Again, if these 3 Dragoons don't die, you can just pull back here, and the Dragoons can't exactly follow you, because you pretty much just plant a few mines, take a few shots with your tanks, and then just, you know, wander on back. Again, thanks to this absolutely horrific formation. You know, a reasonable question is, well, why is this so bad if we compare it to Destination? In Destination, you have a backdoor entrance. Isn't it the same on this map? Well, in Destination, you can keep that backdoor entrance blocked up by that mineral for as long as you want. And then when you mine it out, that's when it opens up. Moreover, whenever you do mine it out, you can even plant a Dragoon there to be in good shape. And so that way, you don't have to deal with this sort of stuff. Look at this. Already planting mines in position to get ready to do some damage up top here. Just already sort of claiming that position. And also on Destination, if we compare that, you know, you have to scoop around the backside. You have to scoop really far away from all the action to be able to hit this expansion from behind. So it makes it kind of dangerous for counterattacks. But, you know, with this high ground advantage, any push here, you can just really push here and then, like, just walk right up there. So it's kind of dangerous. So now actually coming back to the game at hand, Best has done a very normal opening. He went for the 2 Gateway Dragoons. He went straight for the Observers after that, or actually he went for the Observers, then got the 2nd Gateway, and then he expanded. Very, very safe. Did not as good a job of holding off the push as he could have, but still pretty normal. We see Firebathero, if we ignore that little screw up at the start, he basically went 2 factory and did straight up expansion. Put a lot of pressure on early. Neato, right? And this is something I was really impressed by this decision. He adds on 3 factories flush against this back wall, very far away from his other 2 factories. Because, to be honest, all Protosses are going to send an observer fairly quickly to wherever your factories are being positioned. And this sort of very wide spread is pretty uncommon. You don't really see this sort of thing go on. Sometimes you'll see them spread out because of space reasons. For instance, on Outsider, players will occasionally have their factories sort of, you know, sprawling out all over their base. But on this map, we actually do have enough room to cluster everything together. I think that's super cool to do this. Look at this. No SCVs producing. None at all. That's one thing that you need to note about this build. There are a lot of cool timing pushes you can do as Terran, against all races actually, where you just stop making SCVs. I mean, in this matchup right now, we're seeing 5 factories get thrown down, no SCVs being made, only depots and units. Yeah, we're not even seeing any extra gas being made. Very, very aggressive push. You know, in Terran vs. Zerg, sometimes Terran will cut all SCVs, get 2 more barracks, and just try to flood you with 6 barracks of Medic Marine really early on to cheese kill you to death. Yeah, they'll kill you to death. Oh, God forbid they kill you to death, right? But Terran are really good at killing you to death just when they cut SCVs like that. And these are little things that you should consider if you're really trying to strengthen a mid-game push. Let's say you do a push and it keeps almost working and you just can't quite get in the position you want. Figure out a way to cut SCVs, get a few extra units, push in there, get the location you want, and then go back to making SCVs. Just trusting that you'll have a delayed expansion. So now Best is finally starting to move across here. But look at this. Look at the fear you have to have as Protoss. You inch over here, and if you get too many Dragoons on the other side of these double bridges, a bunch of Vultures swing around back, and they punch you right in the face. And look, tons of Vultures coming out. Look, the same basic structure to this push. It's a little bit later of a push, but it looks exactly like that early game push, where it's a bunch of tanks coming out, and then the Vultures flooding in from behind. And 2 base Arbiter coming in here. We see some more gateways being thrown down there. And see, look, all these Dragoons now have to drag their dumb AI'd asses across the double bridge, glitch around a bunch like this, and then retreat back to the other side of the double bridge. Because not only is this map imbalanced for Protoss, but Dragoons are also imbalanced against Protoss. And see, look at this. Look at this number of vultures here. So, we're just going to go ahead and do a little bit of counting here. So we have these tanks that we've been stockpiling, but we're going to see a few more vultures coming here. So there's, I'm going to wait for them all to cluster up here so we can get the count. There's 6 right there. It's right when it pushes across. Look at this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I think there's a 9th one on the minimap somewhere. But I mean, this is going to be real helpful for pushing forward. And that was just 3 fast production cycles out of those back 3 hidden factories. Alternatively, you can just get 6, 7 tanks and just start cranking out nothing but vultures out of all your factories. And you're still going to be in really good shape. And look at this beautiful siege up. I love the way that Firebathero pushes in here, right? So notice the planning in there, the foresight, the fact that he was able to start floating that engineering base so early on. And I mean, honestly, if Protoss tries to pick off that engineering bay, he still has to worry about counterattacks at the back. You know, just having 1 or 2 little things that worry about all game long can completely skew the balance of the map. So that's nice little reaction timing. Notice that most of the tanks are on the other side of the double bridge, and that he's going to be pushing across the bottom double bridge. Because if you think about it, no, I'll just stick to this screen. If you think about it, if you have tanks down here, and you have tanks up here, they're defending a line like this. And these tanks are going to be hard to get to because they're in a corner. And these tanks are going to be hard to get to because they're at the other side of the double bridge. Whereas if you pushed across this top one, you'd kind of have this weird, you'd have this like big circular area of cover, which means you can get flanked really, really easily. I think pushing across the bottom is very clearly the correct choice. Even though going across the top feels faster because you just bounce in and cut directly into Protoss's base. Really, if you bounce down here and push, you just have a much higher chance of success. And this really, as an example of just mid-game pushes in general as Terran, this is the correct look to it. You really want to be sprinting to a location and then doing these very slow but impossible to break pushes. Notice that we really haven't seen any more tanks be added on. We just have tons and tons of vultures. In low unit counts, if you just have 4 or 5 tanks and a ton of vultures, Dragoons really have a big struggle with that. Big struggle bears there. And killing off the mines, that way they don't backfire too hard. And pushing forward with the turrets there, fantastic. Trying to do a little bit of zealot bombing, but I mean, Protoss is in pretty much a tight spot right here. And, you know, spending a little bit of extra gas to get those add-ons for the ComSat. Very cool, old-school style build from Firebathero. Just nice, cool mid-game pushes. And if you actually look at the mini-map, we see that there is no gas mining at Firebathero's expansion. We actually haven't even started building it. And now we have a few extra tanks get added. So because Best is incredibly good, you know, it takes them a while to actually, lose this game. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, about how to do this, like, push-busting stuff. But see, dropping in from this high ground, look how smart that is. Coming from the area, we're probably not going to have vision unless that engineering base floating from on top of it. And also notice that there is a bunch of Dragoons that are coming from below. We have Dragoons that are positioned here, not just so that we have a big concave when we crush it, but also because we need to defend this stupid back alley from any sort of possible counter-harassment drops. And this is always a good time to do a push, is right before you get another set of Zealots to flood out. Because then everything comes in and you whittle down some lines and the more Zealots just kind of pierce right on in there. Because Zealots are generally the things that die the most quickly whenever you're trying to break a push. So if you have another Zealot group ready to just, sprint right in there. And look at how dumb this is. Protoss actually does need to retreat this way. A lot of Protosses will retreat into the natural, but you really kind of have to come back this way because, 1, you want to be able to push down from high ground and get the high ground advantage. But 2, more importantly, you can't have your opponent just happily waltzing his way up here and being able to siege your expansion from high ground. And this, I think, is a little sloppy by Firebathero to unsiege these tanks and just try to push a little bit far forward. I think that's the reason that this push doesn't, just continue to just lock down right there. And this, I think, was a very impressive job by Best. But look at this. Once we get to the double bridge, Protoss really has to pull back. I mean, it's just so hard for Protoss to just deal with this. Now, the big danger to think about is Terran. Yeah, and see, this is why I don't like pushing across this top bridge. Look at how easily this is just killed off. You know, vultures, pick them off. These tanks going to fall relatively easily without really that many units for Terran. Or for Protoss. It looks like one tank did live. Sigh. But, you know, still, I stand by what I said. I think this push is a little bit more effective if you kind of dip down and then crunch in. And we're going to see Firebat do that. He's going to actually scoop up and get to that high ground expansion I keep boxing and blaming for all these horrible imbalances that we haven't really seen yet. But I mean, this is just, I just do not like this map as the Protoss pieces. Have not played a game on it, though. I've played a game on most maps and most matchups, but never played a game on this, and man, do I ever not want to. Holy crap. So you see, the Vultures really allowing us to push forward. I mean, the tanks really can't get into a position unless a bunch of Vultures sprint ahead and plant mines there. But it's going to be pretty easy because now we're starting to be able to scoop down here as Terran and watch the Protoss units just constantly evaporate. Here's a nice little mine action. Oh, it didn't go off. There is one point where, like, the mine just, like, totally self-screws over best. Oh my god, it just backfires so hard. Maybe it's here? Oh. You know, right idea by Best to try to, you know, just suicide stuff, to try to get the mines to drag. But, I mean, this is just such an awful position to be in. So, I mean, the game's going to head on a little bit longer. So, at this point, what we should really learn from the Terran perspective is that even with a push that's pretty much really delayed, right? We built our 2 factories late. If you push properly, like by cutting SCVs and by focusing really hard on the key points of terrain, which is, you know, other side of the double bridge, you can have a very strong push that, you know, can do a lot of damage even with these more modern openings. Because that's a problem that a lot of Terran players have whenever they do try to go back to these old school push styles. They try to pull away from all these very fast armories and very fast dropships and very fast science facilities and try to go more to, like, the, you know, mass mineral vulture pushes really quickly. Is that, They falter a little bit because of bad positioning and not focusing on key terrain and not slowing the push down that we're seeing right here. And then they abandon that sort of strategy. We don't want to do that because we want to be able to rape our opponents in all sorts of ways. We like to have a wide variety, sort of like a Crayola crayon box, like 96 different flavors of rape that we can enact. And that's what we're really seeing right here, is the fact that Firebathero is doing this push, and it's the slowness of it. The fact that he's able to get to this position right here, and we're pretty much stuck in deadlock here for an incredibly long period of time. And as Terran, you do need to be concerned about the fact that you have not added on additional SCVs at this north base. You do need to be aware of the fact that you have not taken another expansion yet. I'm not saying that Firebathero should have expanded. I just think it's important to note that as Terran, you're pretty committed to this push. A lot of times, you know, I'll talk about this push as, you know, an advantage. You know, you try to do this push to, you know, swing a little bit of stuff in your favor so you can expand or so you can upgrade or so you can do something else. But this push is pushing for the sake of killing him, you know, with the slow death grip. And look at this. This is, I think, was my favorite part of this game. Look at the way that Firebathero is doing this push. He's getting everything in position, and then he's putting one tank up here, and that's it. That's like all he's going to do in terms of advancing forward. In a sense, what Firebathero was really going for was a beautiful concave here, so he could really surround any Dragoons or Zealots coming in. He just wanted to have a beautiful surround there. And then just have 2 tanks shooting at the Nexus, because that's where he's going to get a huge advantage. So note here how few SCVs there are. Note here how there's very, very few SCVs, so this Arbiter could potentially do some serious damage. But what I want to do is I want to stop, and I want everyone to just stare at the minimap for a little bit. Let's just stare and think of your Firebathero. What is the one thing that we're very clearly forgetting to do that we could very easily do? Scout the rest of the map for some other expansions. That is, I think, the #1 way that people lose whenever they do some sort of very intense, continuous pushing or attacking in all matchups, really. You know, you'll see the Zerg player throwing in tons of Zergling Lurker, you know, Protoss expansions or Terran expansions, you know, having to lift, having to pull back, there's all sorts of rearrangement going on. Or like in this game right here, Terran's doing a slow push, and there's all this battling, this back and forth action at the front. You spend so much energy and time focusing on what's going on at the front that you just forget the fact that your opponent may have just expanded somewhere else. In fact, as Protoss, one of the most common techniques is if a bunch of Mutalisks run into your main and they're killing off your Nexus, they're trying to battle them, take a probe and go expand somewhere else. I distinctly remember a bunch of games on Rush Hour that I lost where I kept getting into the Protoss's main, killing off the Nexus, and then he would just have expanded somewhere else, and I really wouldn't have gotten that big of an advantage. So that's what I really, that's why I was like, okay, everyone, look at the mini-map. Notice how none of this bottom area is scouted at all. At all. I don't know why I put too much O in that. Yeah, at all. Nothing at all down here. There's no scouting down there at all. He could have easily expanded and built a whole bunch more gateways and really been pulling back into a much more defensively good position. And then because Arbiters are imbalanced, they can recall after they're dead. Very strong to be able to do that. AKA cheating. Unfair, it's the cheats. So there's Firebathero. His head's slightly tilted back, but still pretty far forward. And what's nice whenever you're doing these sorts of like lightning pushes is that you have so many vultures that you can just draw back very quickly. Now we're seeing a ton of stuff get pulled back here, but I think that not that many tanks have been drawn away from the front. Maybe one or two, but probably that's about it. Because really, if your opponent does this sort of recall, he doesn't really have enough units to break a light contain at the front. So yeah, see, look at this. Slow eventual death of that Nexus. And then what does Terran need to do? Well, nothing, really. I mean, you just need to make sure you don't end up losing your contain. You need to scout for the expansions, and then you just need to keep squeezing, You keep building extra turrets for defense in your main. You add on more SCVs. Yeah, see, look, there's still tanks here, still sort of holding this nice little scoop around here. But Terran's going to pop right back in here, keep pushing. Yeah, see, there's some extra tanks that weren't pulled too far back. Yeah, and look at this. Notice the fact that Firebathero kind of cuts down and to the right. He really wants to make sure he has control of that high ground area. Going right back into that little back V, not trying to be too passive with him. Yeah, look, and just scooping right around the side. Some long-range mining going on for Best, and then he has, like 10 minerals left here? 32 total, sorry, yeah. Pretty much nothing. And we're going to see Best sort of hold on for a little bit longer. But, I mean, notice, we just saw 2 seconds ago. Let's actually rewind that. That's actually pretty significant. So we see nothing here. Absolutely nothing. And look, a bunch of these units actually draw back. Because why are you pushing forward to kill an expansion that's already dead? You don't need to kill your opponent off. You don't need to get into his main. What you need is to not die to a recall. What you need is to not die to a hidden expansion. Everything that Firebathero was doing has been aggressive and great, but this, I think, is another key period where tons of people screw up, is that they do the push and they don't get what the purpose of the push was. The purpose of this push is to make it my 2 bases as Terran against your 1 base as Protoss, and you have no way to, get around me. Players just view their pushes as a tool to go kill the opponent. Which, really, you don't need to go in there and eliminate all his buildings. Firebathero's just hanging out right here. Completely correct. Absolutely stand by that decision. And eventually, Protoss is going to run out of money. Very nice little starvation play here. A lot of cool pushes. Oh, there's the mine backfire I remember. Holy cow. Let's just watch that for entertainment value. Oh, yeah. Go, 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 little zealot. There he is. There he is. He's in the orange life. Uh-oh. Here they come. Yeah, oh, that was totally sweet. I'm not above the more little viscerally pleasing aspects of StarCraft. Oh, explosions, things dying. How awesome. So Firebathero himself is running a little bit low on money in the main, but still has plenty at the expansion. And Best is bummed out because his maps are unfair. Again, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because this has only been a rudimentary, sort of at-a-glance analysis. Again, totally sweet mind explode. But I mean, still, the points I'm bringing up are valid. Terran needs to, or Protoss needs to worry about all these little Terran exploits. It's going to be real hard for Protoss to get into some sort of good positions. I'm starting to think, what will be some ideal builds for this map? I mean, 2-base Arbiter seems to make sense, because then you can exploit this sort of, windy-worvy terrain here. Maybe some carrier builds would be good here. I have to think a little bit more on it, about how that transitioning would work. But, notice that Terran is pushing forward with his vultures to plant mines and to, set a whole bunch of, kill off a whole bunch of probes. He's moving forward with the SCV so we can build command centers to really make Best wear it. Yeah. But I mean, notice none of the tanks are advancing forward. Nothing else is really moving forward. It's just the vultures. Nice, slow death. So we have watched a push for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes of a 20-minute game. The push went from here to there. That's it. This is the entire movement in 10 full StarCraft minutes, which in human, time is like a million years. And in dog years, it's like 7 million years. I mean, it's like a really long time. This push is just not really advanced that far, and that's really what's won Firebathero the game. It's very slow, very methodical, very exploitative of the terrain. And I think we're gonna just see Best just randomly leave all of a sudden. He's just gonna try to do some stuff with Archons. They're not gonna go well. Yeah, and there's a good game. There's the Archon doing some firing. It's not even dead yet, but he's gonna leave. So, I did end up talking a lot about what I thought were the sort of imbalances in the map there, but really the two things to focus on are how Firebathero, what his backup plan was. He was going to go 14 Command Center on this map because, honestly, I think Best is a better player than Firebathero. But his backup plan was to do something that exploits the structure of this map. And the 2 factory push is straight up really, really strong. And the way that he did the push to get his expansion up and the way that he set up outside the front is just a wonderful example of how to do mid-game pushes very, very effectively. Very, very slow, very awesome, very kick-ass. Let's take some questions from my fantastic, wonderful viewers. So Colossus says, I'm digging this. Let me just mute the chat, because it keeps scrolling past. Haha, muted the chat. Colossus says, how about 2-base carriers? All the narrow paths prevent a good Goliath's concave. Or would a 2-fact push like this from Firebathero be too strong against it? That's one thing that makes Katrina is what I was trying to say. But I'll say it, Katrina. So on Katrina, what's nice is that we actually have the big ramp at our front, so our Terran opponent has to push uphill to get us. So exactly like Colossus says, a 2-factory push is probably going to be a little bit difficult to deal with. So when I mentioned carriers early on and how I'd have to think about it, there's a number of ways to go 2-base carriers, and I think the way that you'd kind of have to do it is to open up Reavers. I think some sort of fast Reaver opening, because you can use the Reavers to control the double bridges pretty well, and you have the luxury of being able to pull back to your natural relatively easily thanks to the air transport capabilities. Because really, if you just have only Dragoons the way Best did right here, you notice how passive he has to be with them. And Best does like to be passive. You watch a lot of his games on Fighting Spirit or Ultimatum, he pretty much just positions all his units very defensively and says, hey, as long as you don't mess me up with harassment, I'm going to get way more units than you. And the problem is with this map, it's a little bit, so that's why I like the idea of opening up Reavers. So some sort of 2 gateway into Reaver, expand, straight into Carrier. Or, 2 gateway Dragoon into expand, into Reaver, and then into Carrier. Just some combination of a Nexus, 2 gateways, a Reaver, and a Shuttle, and then going straight for carriers. That, I think, is the way to go carriers on this map. Let's actually, because I do like the idea of carriers on this map, let's just take a brief look at it. I think Terran will obviously have to start killing off these center neutral buildings in order to, really be able to maneuver properly with Goliaths. But, even then, if I'm going to imagine ideal circumstances and say if our Terran opponent's here and Protoss is here, then I can easily just bounce right across this terrain. And I can clearly see some difficult movement right here for Goliath. Even if we're cross-mat, being able to sort of cut like this, you can hug to the center pretty close because your opponent kind of has to wiggle up and around to get places. So you know what? I'm going to say that if Protosses find good solutions to these maps, it's going to be probably carrier-centric, I would imagine. Looking at just the standard sort of ground army type stuff, just it makes me vomit. So let's see. So Logic says if the map is so imbalanced, this is a very how would I put it? It's a good question. There's a cooler word for it. There's a sexier one. This is a very provocative question. There we go. Logic says, if the map is so imbalanced, why did SKT1 send out Best instead of Fantasy or even Hyuk? You have to think about how weird it is to prepare for Winners League. If I'm being sent out in the first set, I pretty much have the easiest time because I practice my map, and a lot of times I think if I win, I also need to have some practice on the second map. So I pretty much practice those two a lot. Generally not the third or the fourth. Firebathero said he didn't practice for the third or the fourth at all. But what if you're not the first? What if you're like the second in line or the third in line? What you want is for the right player to land on the right maps. So I'm actually curious. Let me go back and look at the map rotation that happened last night. Yeah, coming up after that was Tornado, Matchpoint, Judgment Day. I think Tornado and Matchpoint in particular would be nice maps for Best. I think that those sort of attune to his style quite well. So it could have been the fact that they sent Best out because they were assuming Kanata would win Game 1, and they wanted to have Best ready for Games 3 and 4, and then have Best sort of loosely prepared for Game 2. I also think that's part of the reason why they sent Bisu out on Tornado, because I think they have good strategies for Protoss on that map. So why did they send out Best instead of Fantasy or Hyuk? I don't have an answer for Hyuk. I think the reason they didn't send out Fantasy is because Fantasy was practicing for the later stages. I think Fantasy's their ace player, so they want him to practice maps 4, 5, 6, and 7 because he's the strongest player on the team. So they want to make sure that in case anything else goes wrong, they can always rely on Fantasy to come out in the end. But why didn't they choose Hyuk? I don't know if I have an answer for that. Maybe I will sometime in the future. So Brutal says, do you think Firebathero could have done more to win faster? Or was Best playing too well defensively? The correct answer is you should never, ever care about winning faster. Winning faster just doesn't mean anything in StarCraft. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. What you want to make sure is that there is zero chance of losing. So I think there was a thread a while back that had people's average game lengths in there, and a lot of Zerg players had around somewhere between 9 and 11 minutes for an average game. My average game was about 15 to 18 minutes. I have very long games because I get myself in a lot of positions as Zerg where I'll get a big advantage, I'll kill off his natural, and then I'll just pull back and just let him run out of money, which is really what we see Firebathero do right here. He just let his opponent run out of money. And it's an extremely safe way to win. It takes a little bit longer, but that's not really a big deal. I don't think that there was a way that Firebathero could have won faster, but then I don't really think it matters. I think, Best actually should have, made Firebathero have a harder time pushing, because Best lost 3 Dragoons early on unnecessarily. So I guess that would be my answer to that. Never worry about how quickly you win. So Jay says, when Toss goes out with early Reaver or Dark Templar drops, and as Terran, you have a massive tanks and vultures at your natural. And I muted him and cut his question in half. Hooray. I should probably read the questions briefly. So here's a good question by See Me Fly. See Me Fly says, could Best try going High Templars instead of Arbiters? Could that have helped to break the push? 2 answers for that one. The first one is to say, I think that when you're in tight spots, transitions into High Templar are good, because when you're in a tight spot, that really means you can't really expand. So you pretty much just get the gas that you have available. You get the Templar, which are relatively cheap, and suddenly you're able to produce out of 8 gateways, 8 or 9 gateways from 2 bases instead of 6 or 7, because those extra 2 or 3 gateways are producing pretty much gas units. Excuse me. And Storm's obviously nifty. So, I think that is a nice alternative. I think that any situation in which you did transition into High Templar should be practiced. You should make sure that you're not just saying, well, I heard Day 9 say High Templars were okay, and since he endorses it, I'm going to do it, Make sure that you have the timing set out smooth, because Templar do take quite a bit of time to get out, to get the Storm, do all that sort of stuff. The second answer I have to that question is, I'm pretty sure that Best had practiced that 2-based Arbiter build a lot, and that was his build, that was the way he was going to play. And given this somewhat unexpected, unorthodox circumstance, I still believe it's always best to stick to whatever your, practiced build order is. And I think that's what we saw here, is that maybe there are some variations that Best could have done, but I really think that sticking to your build will always get you more wins in the long run. So Jay, who got his question cut off, I can now take his question, says, when Toss goes out with early Reaver or Dark Templar drops, and as Terran you have a mass of tanks and vultures at your natural, How many and which types of units should Terran send to stop this? And would the delay of stopping the drop do significant damage to the timing of the push? What I would say is you shouldn't really split your stuff up. You shouldn't like push and try to defend from drop. Just try to make sure you're adequately defended from drops completely before you ever really consider pushing. Yeah, that's the way I'd put it. I guess that is all I have to say about that. I don't like the idea of pushing in the midst of a drop. There's actually, I think it was WEG, World Esports Games, or WF, World Esports Festival, where it was Kingdom against Sea Shield, and it was on Luna, which, as you know, was made in the prehistoric dinosaur ages of StarCraft, and... oh, by the way, I already have the questions I want selected, so a lot of you are still asking questions, so unfortunately I'm done with that. But anyways, in that game on Luna, Kingdom just opened up with, a very standard 2-gateway expand, then went for Reaver Harass, then played very normally, but C opted not to get any anti-air. No, he didn't get any engineering base, didn't get the armory. He just got a bunch of factories really, really fast to do this unbelievably powerful push, but he was locked into his base. Because in one of the games, he tried to move out and just got, all his SCVs just demolished, And then the second game, he had to, hold back and just position all his, big, giant push-level army in his base statically just to make sure this drop didn't do all this damage. So what I would say is just make sure you're defended from a drop before you do anything else, because it's such a huge pain in the ass. And the way I would think of it is not to worry about that, not to think, oh, but my push time is getting screwed up. You should say, if my opponent is devoting money to harassment, then his main army is weaker. Therefore, if I do a slightly later, slightly weaker push, that's okay because I'm still on equal footing with my opponent. So Shadow says, when I'm playing Protoss vs. Terran, it seems like the only times I lose is when I attack the Terran and suicide my army. When is it effective to attack the ridiculous Terran army ball? What I would say to that is... there's a handful of circumstances. What I would do is I would divide the situations where you're seeing the army up into into categories. So there is the Terran mid-game push that's designed to kill you, which is what we're seeing Firebathero do in this game. In those circumstances, you should really have enough units to get a good flank and then just surround and crunch it. I'm trying to think if there's a good example I have off the top of my head. You know what? Watch Day 9 Daily, number 40-something. It was Nada against Bisu on Arcadia 2. Nada did this cute little mid-game push, and if you look at the timing of Protoss' army, everything Protoss was doing was devoted to just killing that push. Yeah, totally kick-ass. I think what you're referring more to is... when you run in there and when suppose you have a maxed army, or suppose you've just been building up a bunch of stuff and Terran's got the opportunity to build up his bunch of stuff, I would say that you need to have a plan for after the army, for the attack as it's going, for how to do more damage to his army. So for instance, if it's that sort of situation, late game max, and you're running all your units in, your plan can be, I have 30 gateways. I will replenish and flood with a second wave that will kill this off. Your plan can be, I am going to recall into his base to spread everything out thin, to slowly wear his army away, so that way when I finally do attack with a big push, I end up killing it off. I think the answer is, for the most part, just make sure you're not in really awful positions, especially when armies are getting bigger. There's nothing wrong with just pulling back and waiting to better positions till you have Templar and Storm and that sort of thing. These are the words that Day 9 speaks for these sorts of things. So, Paper Luigi, I will happily take your question. Well, he asked a question about Judgment Day, so I'll put that off for when I do an analysis of Judgment Day. Let's see here. So Trap says, hi Sean, why didn't Best get a third gas, i.e. with help from a shuttle, and tech to Storm as he had already gotten Arbiter tech, perhaps even before? Again, I think that once the Arbiters had gotten out, I think that was already such an unbelievably tense situation for Best that it's difficult to think of what to do next as Best. I think that if he had devoted money to getting a shuttle and expanding, he wouldn't have had enough units and would have been pushed off at the front and would have died. So I think at that stage in the game, that's why he wasn't getting a shuttle to expand earlier. The question as to why he wasn't getting a third before then is I just think he practiced a 2-base Arbiter build. So in a sense, he practiced a 2-base Arbiter build, And right when his build's about to get going and about to take more expansions, he has a huge push at his front, so he just never gets the opportunity to take those expansions. So honestly, I think that is an important lesson to take away from that. A lot of players will rewatch that and think, well, Best just needed another base. He should get another base. But in practice, you'll find that you just end up dying. Make sure that you don't try to do something that seems logical, because... Let me rephrase that. Don't do what seems like the obvious choice without considering if you have enough money and time to do that without dying. I mean, a great example is, this actually consistently happens every time I show someone who's like not a StarCraft gamer, game of StarCraft. They'll watch Zerg versus Terrans, and they'll see the Zerg open Lurkerling, and then transition into Defiler, and then transition into Ultralisks, and they'll say, why don't you just get a bunch of Wraiths? He has no anti-air. And the answer is that, first of all, the instant you start to go Wraiths, you suddenly don't have enough Medic Marine and tanks to hold off the Lurkerling, Defiler, Ultralisk. And second of all, you'll just die once you do get the Wraiths, because they'll just make any number of Hydralisks, or some Spore Colonies, or a Scourge, which are really fast to build, and it'll lose. Same thing here. If you try to get that expansion, I mean, it seems like that would have been nice for him to have an expansion, but the problem is just being able to get there. So definitely there's nothing wrong with sticking to your build and making sure that you're just trying to hold off these pushes and trying to really aggressively fight back against that. And I really think that should be the focus. So we just have time for one more question before I must go and drink some delicious hot tea. Let it be the best question of all time. Scrolling through the list. Let's see here. Milk says, Milk says, would Stormers or maybe Reavers have been helpful at all in breaking the contain that Firebathero had? So Stormers we've already talked a little bit about, but let's come back to Reavers. Again, I think that it's important to have already incorporated Reavers into your play. So let me generalize this to all walks of StarCraft life. Anytime you're in some situation where you think, hey, X would be useful right now, a lot of people think, therefore, that means they should get X right then. So, for instance, hey, a Reaver would have been useful in stopping that push. Does that mean he should have gotten Reavers in that situation? Or, Vultures have been harassing my worker line, so it would be nice if cannons are there. Does that mean I should get cannons early? Most of the time the answer is no. You should not say, what would be nice right now, therefore can I get it right now? Instead you should say, what would be nice right now, and how could I have gotten that earlier on without screwing up anything else I want to do? So, for instance, Reavers, I think Reavers would have been absolutely helpful in holding off the push, because it's really nice to have Reaver shots right up those, thin ramps. It's hard to surround the Reavers. The Reavers can get really good shots off at clustered packs. It's totally awesome to get the Reavers. But we need to, therefore, make sure that we're doing Reaver harass earlier on, that we already have the Reaver prepared. That is the correct way to go about making those little adjustments. So, that's going to wrap up Day 9 Daily number 55, I guess it was today. Tune in tomorrow for Day 9 Daily number 56. And right around the corner, around Day 9 Daily number 60, we'll be doing the D-level players replay analysis. So now, if you are somewhere between D and C+, send me your replay. And we're going to be doing an analysis of it. We're going to be choosing another somewhere between 8 and 10 replays. And this is what I want you to do. This is the format I want you to do it in. Say the matchup that it's in, and do 3 sentences, no more, no less, just like 3 sentences of why it is an interesting game to look at and to think about. Perhaps what you did wrong. Oh yeah, by the way, D- players can totally come into. I don't want to be like, oh no, D-, oh that's too low. D, yeah, we can take that. And that way people are like, oh, I guess I better create a new account before I submit. Just 3 sentences of why it's an interesting game and what's cool about it and why it should be taken. There's a lot of people who do these like huge, elaborate, giant like stories of what went on, but I think it's very important for any of you for your own replay analysis to be able to boil the action of the game down into just a few sentences, so that way you can think about everything in a much cleaner, concise way. And that way you can improve one step at a time instead of trying to do one huge, giant improvement with some hyper analysis. So yeah, PM me these replays on teamliquid.net. My ID is day9 end bracket. And that will wrap up Day 9 Daily number 55. I look forward to checking out your replays. Thanks so much, guys. Cheers!